Could you please say your name, your rank, a little bit about your work in the military?
My name is Dan Benjamin. I was a sergeant. Work in the military was a combat engineer. Basically, we build bridges either on land or in the water, and then when we were done, we blow them up.
Why did you join the military?
The main reason I joined the military is because I was young, 18, wasn't sure what I wanted to do in life, and I wanted to go to college and didn't have the money for it, so I went ahead and joined the military to get tuition assistance.
What are some of the memories or stories you had of the military?
Some of my stories that I can distinctly remember was being in basic training and being away from home, which was tough for me because of all the people in my family, and I like being around them. But being away for those 3 to 4 months was really tough. I was in the winter time. I can remember getting there at midnight, getting off a bus, and I can remember them saying we were going to eat. We went in to eat, and I was all excited because there was pizza on the table. So as soon as we took 2 bites, they hollered at us and told us to get up. We were done. That's when I knew I was definitely in the military. And some of the other things I remember is the 10-mile march with the 60-pound rucksack on your back. That was very mentally tough, probably more mentally tough than anything I've ever gone through in my life. And I remember going through the gas chambers, sitting in the gas chambers with all 12 of us sitting there talking. We had to state a certain amount of things for a minute, and you had to wait till everybody was done before you could go out as a group. I also remember, obviously, building bridges and going through those kind of things at basic training. I remember being on call for the Kuwait War back in 1989 was when my 6 years were up, and I was sitting there watching TV with my girlfriend, and I realized that they broke in and told us that the United States had just went into Kuwait to kind of keep them protected from Iraq. And wasn't even an hour later, I got a phone call and said we were on standby. Fortunately for me, that was the only time I was ever really able and ready to go to a war. But fortunately, I didn't have to go.
What was one of the best days that you had in the service that you remember?
There's a couple. I can remember graduating from basic training was one of the best days, knowing that I accomplished something that I didn't know if I could accomplish it, to be honest with you. And coming out on top and getting the physical fitness award was one of those things that was pretty exciting for me because I had never been somebody who got into fitness as much as a lot of other people around me. But walking across that stage and getting that award, knowing that I graduated with that honor, was something that I will always remember.
Do you have any memories or remember from the worst days while you're in the service, like the hardest or?
I'd say the gas chamber was probably one of the toughest because it makes you realize at that point in time, even though you're probably not going to die, you have to stay in there a little bit longer than they keep you in there, but they'd leave you in there long enough to know that you realize that you can't breathe. And I think that's when you realize how important your life is and how much fun being around the people you are and who support you. And then obviously the cold weather in Fort Leonard Wood, it got a lot colder than Cincinnati.
Is there a story about someone you served with that you wish to share?
There's a couple stories, actually. There's a guy I served with who was in Vietnam, and I can remember sitting down talking to him every time we had camps. And he would share his stories, and the one particular one he shared was going in and getting his hair cut in the afternoon, and then that night, the same guy who gave him his haircut would tap him on the shoulder and tell him to be quiet because that guy was coming into the camp to kill other people of his unit. So that was really tough to swallow, to hear that, our veterans like him had gone through stuff like that. Some of the other tough ones, even though I never gone to combat, you never hear these stories a whole lot. We were number 4 in the country as far as a unit goes, combat engineer unit goes, so we were one of the top, and that's why we were on call a lot more than people ever knew. We were training up in Michigan, and we were training against regular Army, and obviously we were doing what we call bivouac, and we were doing war games, and one thing led to another, and next thing you know, kind of a fight broke out, and a guy got killed with a crowbar. It's a story that you never hear because it has nothing to do with a war. I can remember being in Indiana when we were training again because we had to keep our status as a top unit in our combat engineer unit, and we were again training with the regular Army, and there was a little beef there. The regular Army thought that we weren't good enough because they called us weekend warriors, Well, we took it serious, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't have been a top unit. And they came in and they gassed us in the middle of the day right before lunch, and that was off limits. So when they gassed us, we were obviously ready for it. So to get our gas mask back on and to try and protect all the food that we cooked, it never happened. So it escalated, and that night we were doing night ops, and one of the military, full-time military personnel decided to shoot a flare. Usually you shoot a flare up so it can light up the sky so you can see everything on the ground. Well, they shot it and they hit somebody in one of the tents and actually ended up killing the person. So again, those are just stories you don't ever get to hear because it's never major or it's never part of the war. So those two things were kind of nerve-wracking to know that kind of went on.
How do you think your military service changed you?
It made me a stronger person. It made me really understand and appreciate the things in life, the happiness, your relatives, your close friends, life in general, to respect it. It made me a little bit more disciplined, something I lacked in my life when I was younger. It made me who I am today, actually, as a coach. It made me more structured. It made me more disciplined. It made me want to get that out of the people I coach and teach.
Can you describe an average day on active duty?
Active duty, well, it depended on what the sergeant felt like that day. Some days we got up at 2 in the morning if he was not happy, and some days we got to sleep until 5 or 6. Got up, we went to breakfast. Once we were done with breakfast, then we'd go do our bivouac type stuff. We'd maybe do a 10-mile march with our rucksack on. We'd obviously march to the range and do some shooting. Then we'd march back, have a little bit of lunch, then we'd go on another march and do some additional training.
What was boot camp like the average day at boot camp?
Boot camp was pretty similar to that, and at times, everybody wants to tell you what the average is. I think some of the tougher ones were when they gave us liberty after we were close to graduation, so they gave us liberty since we all followed the rules. And then as we were out in Liberty, we had to be back at a certain time, which was I think our curfew at that time was 12 or 1 in the morning, so we all made it, except for 2 guys, and we didn't know they didn't make it because you don't control them. So about 4 in the morning they were missing, so they decided to wake us all up, and we were out there in our skivvies just doing all kinds of push-ups and sit-ups, and they were making us crawl on the ground, and it was kind of a pain just because the 2 guys made a choice they didn't want to come in.
What was the first thing you did when you returned back to regular life?
I don't know what the first thing I did for civilization. I can remember my brother and my dad picking me up from boot camp and bringing me home. And I think the first thing we did is actually go out and get a good piece of steak because I didn't get anything like that was well cooked there, so to speak. But I don't remember anything I did specifically. I just came home and spent some time with my family because I hadn't seen them for a while.